Hi, everybody. How you doing tonight?
Good.
Pretty good, pretty good. Okay, so case number one about what we're going to learn tonight is how do we actually enliven these Zoom meetings? Because we're going to be on here for a while. We're going to be socially distanced for a while, and we got to figure out a way to actually connect with people. And I'm telling you that not because the data says it, which it does, not because all the surveys that we're seeing about religion in a time of COVID are telling us that people are looking for real, authentic human connection, because the surveys have told us exactly that, but because that's why you're here, because that's why your synagogue exists. And I hope that's why you're here tonight at this meeting so that we can delve into learning more about that. So you might tonight walk away with some interesting takeaways about what not to do, but hopefully I'm not going to stumble into too many of those stumbling blocks. But hopefully what we can walk away with tonight is some real practical approaches to doing the kind of work that each of you are probably passionate about doing, I hope passionate about doing, that your institutions are designed to do, which first and foremost has to be about serving people. So I want to tell you a brief case study. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit. Did you already hear enough about me from what Josh shared? Does anyone, show of hands, anyone actually need to know anything else about me? Anyone interested? Not so much. Good. Don't worry. You can read my bio some other time. Tonight, I'm like your talking head. I'm the one who's going to come here and hopefully share some interesting information with you. Suffice it to say that I'm a very curious person. And I work for an organization, CLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. And our orientation is that Judaism thrives in times of tumult and times of change and times of transition. And we are in that moment right now. And we have an opportunity to thrive. We have an opportunity to reorient ourselves around why we're here in the first place. One of CLAL's sort of founding stories is the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai leaving Jerusalem after the fall of the Second Temple. Actually, before the fall of the Second Temple, made a deal with Vespasian so that he could sneak out in a coffin, and he left Jerusalem, and he went down to a little place called Yavne. And it was in Yavne where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai took five of his favorite students, and they began to ask the questions. And I say we lead with curiosity, because I think that's what we need to open with more than anything else. Now, Yochanan ben Zakkai had a wealth of knowledge. He knew everything about everything that had to do with Jewish life. And he bridged the generations. He knew everything about the sacrificial temple-based, priest-led Jewish life. And he knew everything about what would emerge as rabbinic Jewish life. But he didn't go down to Yavne with answers. He went down there with questions. And that's why all of his peers called him a heretic, why he became essentially a reject from the normative ruling class of the time, and B, why he was able to break free of many of the norms and expectations that the pre-existing knowledge would have required him to hold on to. And he was able to let go of what the time no longer called for and imagine a new way of doing Jewish life. And 2,000 years later, anything you do Jewishly, it started in a cave in Yavne with a bunch of people sitting around probably a bonfire asking themselves the question, what now? And raise your hand if you have, over the last 3 months, said to yourself, oh my goodness, what now? Maybe there's an expletive sprinkled in there that I'm not going to, because this is being recorded. So, I want to maintain a little bit of dignity. But I'm sure, right, there have been moments where you're like, oh, now this? Oh, my goodness. Now the 511 epidemiologists in a New York Times study are telling us we're not going to get back to normal for 18 months. Are you serious? What now? All right, so what now is the great question of the moment. And hopefully tonight we can spend a little bit of time, and hopefully if we approach it with enough curiosity, we can walk away from tonight with more of the right questions to be asking. So even if there are parts of tonight's webinar that really feel like, these are a lot of great answers, I'm just going to take the answers and bring them back to my synagogue and that's it, then I have failed. If all you do is take away a handful of nice program ideas, answers, solutions, and bring them back to your synagogue and reenact those things, then I have failed tonight. And make sure you put that in the survey, because I know Josh is going to send out a survey afterwards. He always CCs me on the emails, and I'm like, yikes, I don't want to know. But I want to make sure that you walk away with the right set of questions and lenses that will enable you and your communities to serve your constituents better in this moment. Does that make sense? Does that sound like an ambitious thing to accomplish in the next 64 minutes? Do you think we can do it? I think we can. I see 5 smiles. 2 of them are like, I'm just going to humor this guy, but 3 of them looked authentic. So I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm not telling you which ones. So I'm going to hold on to those ones, and we're going to move forward that way. So what I want to maybe just start with really quick is, and you can put it in the chat, that's okay, or you can just say it out loud. And I'll invite everyone, feel free to unmute yourself and whatever. And let's not spend too long on this. I just want you to tell me who you are and what synagogue you represent, just so I can have a sense of who's in the room.
David Sloves from Temple Avodat Shalom in River Edge.
Joe Freeland from the Reconstructionist Community at Temple Israel in Ridgewood.
Bob Goldberg, Temple Emmanuel of North Jersey.
Hi, I'm Nikki Falk from Temple Emeth in Teaneck.
Steve Berman from Avodat Shalom in River Edge.
Ken Emmert from Palm Springs, California.
Jody Ashton from Temple near Tamid in Bloomfield.
I'm Laura Wallach. I'm a cantor at Congregation B'nai Israel in Milburn, New Jersey.
Sherry Kosinski. I'm the cantorial soloist at Temple Betham in Bayonne, New Jersey.
Shara Gastworth, VP Programming and Membership at Shomrei Torah in Wayne, New Jersey.
David Bachman, I'm the rabbi in Temple Beth Shalom in Park Ridge, New Jersey.
Stephen Weiland, Congregation Knesset Israel in Bound Brook.
Okay, I think that's about everybody, right? Belmore is the Jersey Shore, isn't it? Is that right? Am I making that up?
Yes.
I am making that up. Okay, I thought Belmore was in the Jersey Shore. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Bound Brook, I think he said.
Oh, Bound Brook. Okay, well, I don't know where that is, but it sounds like a nice place. And I skipped Simone. Simone, we skipped you. Tell me about yourself. Simone, you are muted, my friend. I'm sorry. I don't know, and I can't unmute you. I have very little power.
Hi, I'm the other Temple Emmanuel. I'm up in Woodcliff Lake of the Pascack Valley.
Great. Okay, the other Temple Emmanuel. That is an important distinction.
I think we have a gentleman here from Franklin Lakes. Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, Temple Emmanuel of North Jersey, Franklin Lakes. Is that right?
That's me.
Okay.
And one more, or 2 more actually.
Aurora Borealis there in Franklin Lakes.
Yes, yes. It's,
How about that, Robert? Northern Lights.
Yes.
That is fantastic. Okay. Well, we've got a lot going on here, and Simone's on the beach. This is pretty nice. I should visit Jersey more often. Okay. I live in Providence, Rhode Island. It's the smallest state, big heart, really good, wonderful place to live, and thankfully not too far away. A direct flight to Newark, so I get to come to northern New Jersey pretty often. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen, and I want to ask. I want to invite a couple. I want to offer a couple of invitations. So I'm going to share my screen, and there are slides and questions I'm going to ask and all that kind of stuff. And now and again, if it gets too quiet, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, so that we can just talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. Because if you're quiet, that means you're pensive, and if you're pensive, that means you're thinking about something, or you're bored. In which case, I'm going to call you out, and we're going to get into a little more shock levitaria, a little more give and take. Does that sound okay? So I'm going to share the screen, but Don't check your email while I'm sharing the screen. I have an email checker built into the Zoom, so I know if you're checking your email while you're doing it. Do you believe me?
No,
Good.
Yes.
Okay. Rabbis never lie. Ask David
That's right.
and Kenneth. See? Okay.
because I don't want them to see me.
All right. Let's do this. Oh, I can't even screen share. Josh, you got to give me a little power, my friend. I need a little, just a little something, a taste.
I think you should be able to. Oh, here, I know why.
There we go. Now I can.
Okay.
Whatever you just did worked. Okay. All right, friends, can you see the screen? Socially distant, spiritually connected? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So programming ideas for a time of pandemic. Really about this time of pandemic. Hopefully we won't need to dust off this slideshow down the line, but maybe there are more pandemics to come. Okay. So here's the agenda. We're going to open up with some opening rounds, and it's a little interactive, so get ready. And then I'm going to offer some general program guidance. So I've been spending the last month or so being in touch with colleagues of mine from all around the country. And I also spend a lot of time coaching synagogues that are going through a variety of different kinds of transformation and innovation processes. I also work with, at this point, about 50 or 60 startups in the Jewish world, startup communities, startup organizations, initiatives. And so what I've gleaned from all of those conversations is, klal and prat. And so in Hebrew, like kind of general guidance and then some specific stuff. So this second part of the agenda is where I'm going to offer some general programming guidance. And third, we're going to talk about the month of Elul, the month leading up to the high holidays, which is coming right up. And maybe you'll take some of these ideas and start them earlier. That's wonderful. Maybe you'll, pick just a handful of them and try them during the month of Elul. That's great. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the high holidays. I'm going to offer a handful of tactical ideas, technical ideas, programmatic ideas, and then just a kind of a grab bag. And then finally, I've also compiled an additional document that I'm going to share with you of additional resources. And you've got here about 25 different very important sets of resources for your continued research in this area of how to engage people during a time of social distancing, and then also how to set a real strategy for your organization, for your synagogue, now that we're moving into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 of the reopening. Does that sound okay for the agenda? Yeah? Okay. Great.
I really would like to go to his thing.
Great. I don't know whose thing you're talking about, but it sounds good. Okay, let's go to the next opening rounds. Here's your question. And I want to ask this because I also want to frame a case study that I'm going to share with you in a moment. But the first question is, what is your synagogue's mission? Now, I guarantee none of you know it off the top of your head. So I want you to Google your synagogue and then go to the homepage wherever your mission is buried and tell me, what is the mission of your synagogue? So I just want maybe give me 3 or 4 examples of a mission statement or the mission of your synagogue. Whenever you want to do it, just unmute yourself. Don't need to raise your hand. We're a small enough crew here that we can just kind of jump in. And I'm not going to make fun of your synagogue's mission, I promise.
I'll start because we actually just went through a rebranding at our temple. So our mission is inspiring our members to make our community more curious, connected, and just.
Beautiful. That's really good. Inspiring our members to make our community more curious, connected, and just. Curious, connected, and just. Great. Who else has one? Also, who is listening to classical music?
On their website.
Could be. Okay.
Would you like to hear my long one?
I love it. I love long mission statements. Yes.
I did not write this, and I would not have done it this way. The mission of Temple Emmanuel is to continually create sacred community, sharing wisdom from generation to generation and person to person. We seek to inspire a commitment among our members to one another, to the greater Jewish community and the state of Israel through a lifelong study of Torah meaningful and enthusiastic worship, the performance of mitzvot, and other deeds of loving kindness, always imbued with the spirit of personal and world repair tikkun. That's it.
Beautiful. In other words, Pirkei Avot, the Torah stands on three things. The world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. But you do it through the lens of community, which is really nice. Good. All right, one more.
I got a long one if you want to hear it.
Let's do it. But I will say, my friend is like an expert in marketing. She always says, words are expensive. Words are expensive. So when it comes to your mission statement and your vision statement, just know that the longer they are, the less attention span, the more you're drawing on people's attention span. So you always want to go shorter. But let's hear it. Go.
Too much time. Inasmuch as the purpose of congregation is to promote Jewish life in the community, the values of the congregation are reflected by our goals, namely to promote the principles of conservative Judaism through practice and observance, to sustain a place to worship, learn, study, and be part of the Jewish community, create opportunity for members to experience religious, spiritual, educational, and social aspects of tradition, strengthen Jewish identity by providing opportunities for participants in life cycle events, ritual practice, and community involvement, create a balance between strict religious standards while welcoming and including understanding each individual's personal observance, respecting the integrity and diversity of conservative practice, and provide an environment that is welcoming and respectful to the community.
Wow.
I haven't really read that in a long time, and now I see why.
That's a lot of comments. Okay. Well, you know what? It's good. Look, the reason why we're doing this is because it is during times of very painful shifts, especially those in the religious landscape, in the American religious landscape, that we tend to stray from mission, and our number one focus tends to be, and I say our, meaning synagogue leadership, our number one focus tends to be, what do we need to do to stay in business or to stay relevant? And those are the two questions that if you keep asking them, you are guaranteed to go out of business and become irrelevant, maybe in that order, maybe not. Now, here's the case study. Blockbuster. Why did Blockbuster go out of business? Everyone thinks they know the obvious answer, because which fancy little startup took them over and disrupted the movie rental industry?
Netflix.
Netflix, right. Netflix was the first one to disrupt Blockbuster. And there were thousands of Blockbuster stores all around the country. And up until actually last year, there was the very last two of them. One of them in rural Alaska, where they don't have any Wi-Fi service, so they were still renting out DVDs. And the other one was this like sort of hipster place in Portland, Oregon, that they finally buckled. Now, so it might seem to be that that's why. But here's what I want to tell you. Before Netflix actually took over Blockbuster, and by the way, Blockbuster had a chance to buy Netflix for $150 million, which is a drop in the bucket compared to what they're worth now. But before Netflix took over, Blockbuster had a down year. So rentals were actually down for 1 year. And you know what Blockbuster did the following year to try to recoup some of that money that they lost on the rental revenue? What did they used to do that was such a nuisance with videotapes? Do you remember this?
They charged you for late returns, which made people never want to go back there again, me included.
Right.
Absolutely, right? And what that taught people who used to rent from Blockbuster, what it taught them is actually they're not in the movie rental industry anymore. What they're in is just the staying in business. And that year, their number one revenue stream was late fees. It wasn't actual rentals. The number one revenue stream the last year that Blockbuster held any market share was late fees. What that did is it alienated their members. It alienated their renters. And it actually made people want to sign up for Netflix, even when Netflix didn't have any good movies to offer. It was just random documentaries and old movies that didn't cost them any money to license. And the reason being, because people actually signed up for Netflix out of spite for Blockbuster. I've been a customer for 15 years and now you're going to charge me $30 because I forgot to return this thing. It's been a week. That is what happens when we drift from mission in times of crisis. When our focus becomes on what do we need to do to survive versus how can we better serve our customers? How can we better serve our constituents? Why are we here in the first place? So if you've got a mission that you can look it up, you can look up your mission on your synagogue's website and it really resonates for you right now, I want you to put that on the front of your brain. Go ahead, write it down on whatever sheet of paper you're taking notes on. I want you to write it down. That's how you're going to remember it. But if it's one of those really long ones that you can't remember it, and by saying everything, it actually says nothing. Right? We say in Talmud, tafasta marbella tafasta. If you try to say too much, you try to do too much, you're not going to do anything at all. Then I want you to go to question 2 on this page. In your own words, why does your synagogue exist? And who's got an answer for that? And maybe another way is, what does your synagogue mean to you? Who has an answer for that?
I have an answer.
Great. Thank you, Sherry.
We're a very, very small congregation, and my parents were founding members of the temple. And I guess we're holding on by a thread. And most of the members that are left are older members. And we're holding on because we have a history with the temple and a great love of wanting to keep the reform movement alive in Bayonne.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So it's really about the history and the memories that are embedded in that synagogue and wanting to keep it going. Great.
Yes.
Anyone else want to share with me? Why does your synagogue exist?
I think if I had to nut it down, it's to provide a wide open arms for the Jewish community, whomever you are, whatever you are, however you present yourself to the world, and whatever you're looking to get out of your own Jewish journey. We're there to help you and to help you and to accept you as you go on that personal journey.
Beautiful. Wide open arms. That's a great image. I want you to hold on to that. No matter where we go with this conversation, everything you do from here on out, you have to ask yourself, is this getting that job done? Are we doing wide open arms? Are we welcoming people no matter where they're coming from? Is this meeting that job? Great. Let me see if there's one other one. Why does your synagogue exist? It's a hard question. I don't want you to feel like you have to defend its existence. It exists. That's a fact. But from here on out, it's not going to be about justifying your existence. It's going to be about really leaning into that reason for being. So who can give me one more? Why does your synagogue exist? Is Simone saying call on me? Simone, I can't read the chat, so you can always just unmute yourself and jump in, okay?
I think I unmuted myself. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted, my friend. Let's hear it.
So the one thing that I think about is that to pass our love of Judaism on to the next generation, so that the children that are having their bar mitzvah, which I think about, that's one of the things that we do. We have a lot of students in our religious school, and I don't want it to just end with our generation. I want the next generation to love being Jewish and be knowledgeable about it. And I think that that's a really important part of our synagogue's existence, to pass that along, our love of Judaism and knowledge of Judaism, to the next generations following me.
Beautiful. Okay, hold on to that. That's your reason for being. Okay, I want everybody to have, for the rest of this conversation, no matter how shiny a programming idea looks, no matter how exciting it is, and then certainly beyond the time of this webinar, as you're really trying to figure out, okay, gosh, we can't open the Hebrew school because we can't meet in person. Yikes, we can't have high holiday services in the sanctuary because we can't gather in groups of greater than 25. So what is it that we're trying to do? Your job is to actually not get to the what, but the why. You understand the distinction? Your job is to separate from the what, which we obsess over in Jewish life. 613 mitzvot. Here are all of the rituals and the fences that we're going to build around Torah. This is the way that we do services, and it's got to be 3.5 hours long. Because why? Because our great-grandparents once sat through services that were 3.5 hours long. Don't worry about the what. You always got to be thinking about the why. Because one thing is for sure, given the constraints that we're operating under right now, we know very well that we can't do the what that we future. So we need to get to the why. We need to get to the why. Okay, let's get to the second round. Here's some general programming guidance. You're going to probably get a copy of these slides, so don't worry about taking down all the notes. As you will see tonight, by the end of 75 minutes, you're going to be bored. You're going to be restless. David's like, I'm already bored. You're going to be restless. Okay, and this is the end of a long day. So 75 minutes is a stretch. Never go past 75 minutes. Okay, I don't care if that means you have to, you're watching, you know, I don't know, Gone with the Wind together and you have to break it up into 2 sessions. That's what you got to do. Okay, and actually 75 minutes is probably a little too long. So what that means is even if you're doing 75 minutes, what's that, Steve?
Keep them under 60.
Keep it under 60. Yeah. And plus, it's like Jewish time. You say, yeah, we'll do it in 60 minutes, and then it's going to be 75 anyway. You switch gears or switch media or switch modes often. That means about every 25 minutes. If you're having singing for 25 minutes, then you do singing for 25 minutes and then switch. Now you want to do guided reflection, then switch. Then you want to do meditation, then switch. Then you do yoga, then switch. You can't keep doing the same mode. And if for some reason, now the minyan that I grew up in the Newton Center minyan, and there's a hard and fast rule. Nobody gives a sermon longer than 10 minutes. Nobody gives a sermon longer than 10 minutes at the Newton Center minyan, except Art Green. Art Green gives a sermon for however long he damn well pleases, because everybody's going to love it and he's brilliant and amazing. And when he decides it's time for him to give a sermon, nobody ruffles their papers when 10 minutes hits. Okay? So what that means is try to switch gears every 25 minutes. If you have an exception to that rule, then at least in the middle of it, you know, if you have some incredible speaker, you can't do Kol Nidre in 25 minutes, and you really want to stick to a liturgical pattern that goes longer than that, by the way, there's a reason why we stand up and sit down so much during services. It's for this exact reason. It's so that choreographically, we're actually getting up. There's blood rushing to our bodies because we're standing up. And then we sit down, and then we bow, and then we do the Grand Aleinu where we're laying down on the floor. The rabbis who developed this choreography weren't stupid. They're doing this so that we can move our bodies and kind of reset a little bit so that we don't get lost in the drone of a long service. So you want to make sure that you're switching gears early and often. Early and often. Okay, does that make sense? Great. Always have a tech person available. Always have a tech person available. No matter how much of a pro you think you are, we've done 1,000 Zooms, then somebody Zoom bombs you. We've done 1,000 Zooms, and guess what? Then the link that you're sharing to the liturgy is like in a Google Doc that's, you know, private, and you don't know how to access it. Whatever it is, if you're facilitating, if you're leading, if you're doing something, make sure there's someone else that you can be like, hey, Steve, can you fix that for me? Because I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have the bandwidth to entertain 25 people while doing this. Next, small is the new large. This is going to be one of the hardest shifts in synagogue life. But I want to tell you why it's a good thing. How many people does your sanctuary hold? Someone give me a number in your sanctuary or your synagogue. How many people does it hold?
About 200.
200. When was the last time you had 200 people sitting in the sanctuary?
Oh, it happens, but not often.
Not often, right? So the synagogue that I used to work at, very proudly, 700 people fit inside of this sanctuary. You know when the last time 700 people? Probably never. But we like to imagine that back in the day, It used to be 700, I'm sure. It used to be waiting room only, I'm sure. That never happened. But we like to hold on to that idea. And then, but the problem is from here on out, every time, even if you get 300 people showing up to a service, the people who have it in their minds that the capacity is 700 will always be thinking about those 400 empty seats. And they will always be thinking about how this feels like a failure. In Jewish life, we very proudly gather in very large groups. We know it. Going back to the Talmud, right? Rabban Gamliel talks about how disappointed he was when there were only 400 seats in the Beit Midrash in his house of study. So what do? They bring in 300 extra seats so that he can have 700 seats in the Beit Midrash. Like, we take pride in our large gatherings, and especially around the high holidays. But obviously, if we do decide to gather in any way, shape, or form, we're going to have to focus on smaller gatherings. But I want to say, whether you're doing in person or some kind of hybrid where you're live streaming and Zooming and different, different formats, small is actually a good thing. Even if you're entirely online, don't assume that you can live stream and get 500 of your members to all sign in and they're going to have a meaningful experience. What you want to focus on is, and you'll see, even tonight, we have 20 participants on the call. Probably only 10, 11, 12 of you are going to be engaging regularly and jumping in and answering questions. And 5 or 6 are going to be checking emails, and 2 might just be kind of just signed in, and maybe something interesting will happen, right? So what you want to know is probably 10 to 15 is the maximum number of people on a Zoom class or some kind of Zoom worship experience that are going to be engaged. So you can't check off the box and say, I engaged all 200 people in my community just because they were invited to a Zoom room. What you want to do is actually find ways to gather in smaller pods over the course of time. The good news is that's actually a trend that COVID has pushed us into, but the Jewish world was already moving forward with. So almost every Jewish community startup that I work with is built on small groups, right? And it's nothing new under the sun, right? This is the Chavurah model from the 70s, but it's coming back, right? These small groups, which are largely lay facilitated, but these are trained facilitators, become the building blocks of much larger, broader communities. So even if you run a synagogue that has 500 members or 300 members or 200 members, you want to be thinking about ways that you can subdivide them, because that's a great way to get more relational, more connection, more of that community feel that people are really yearning for right now. Like, the number one thing they want right now is connection. They're dying for connection. So you got to find ways to make sure that you can do that.
Could I
Next
ask a question? Maybe you'll
please.
Sorry to interrupt, but maybe you'll cover this when we get to high holidays. I agree with you that the smaller Zoom things are certainly more meaningful for the people on it, but particularly with the high holidays, and something with our congregation, I don't know if this is true for others, is when we're all together. For some people, that's the only time of the year that they're actually in shul, and that other people from the congregation see the rest of the members of the congregation. And that sense of community, of being all together in this large, to know that, oh, we actually have a very large congregation. Like, how will we make that happen, with using the, whatever, if we're doing Zoom or live streaming, to get that feeling of, we actually have a very large community and here's everybody, but how do we make it meaningful, and how do we keep that sense of that we're all in this together?
Great. Lorna, beautiful set of questions. So this is exactly the bullet point. Think of your goals and work backwards, right? So if your goal, now you just stated great design challenge, how might we invite every member of our community to feel like they are part of something big, part of something bigger than themselves, which is what's the name of the community?
Congregation B'nai Israel.
Congregation B'nai Israel, right? So how might we do that when we're shifting towards small is the new large? Or if you're on a webinar style Zoom, you can't even see who else is in it. How do we do that? So I've got a number of ideas. Does anyone have an idea they want to jump in and share?
So at Federation, we're experimenting with doing breakout rooms it's not perfect, but at least, because you can't all talk at the same time. It just doesn't work on a Zoom. But the breakout rooms help give people that kind of connection when you have a couple of people in a room.
Great. So here's a suggestion I've got too, Lorna, is have you seen this this app called Tribute?
Don't know that one, nope.
So a lot of people who can't have birthday parties right now, right? And they can't have friends coming over. Tribute is essentially it's like it's a service. You pay $20 for it. You send out the email to all of, or if you're doing it for a spouse or a kid, you send it to all of the friends. And then each of them gets an email that says, we want you to post a tribute. And it's, it's a 1 minute, 2 minute video. They give you a couple prompts. Here's what you want to say about the person, share a story, whatever. And then Tribute actually makes a compilation video. It's a human doing it, not just artificial intelligence. A human who makes the video, cuts the best pieces from all of the different things, and makes one long video for the birthday person. What if you sent that out to every single member of your community? You don't think people would sit through a 30-minute video, even if it meant that they got to see every single member of their community sitting with their families, blessing each other, right? Think about, or do like, a front porch project, a front porch photo project, where you have people standing on their front porch with their families and have a professional photographer come, 15-minute windows, taking pictures. It might cost you as a congregation, might cost you $1,000, but then you get to make an online Facebook or photo album with all of the front porch photos of your entire community, right? What you want to focus on, what you want to invite people to do is feel known, feel like they belong into part of something bigger than themselves, and to do so by shrinking the congregation, right? Ironically, your design question is, how do we make them feel like they're a part of a big thing? The way you do that is actually by shrinking it down and sort of enveloping and wrapping around the family. So I've got 15 other ideas, Lorna, for you that I'm sure if we went through kind of a brainstorming session, we could easily compile those. But the key here is around storytelling and making sure that for you, that needs to be your mission. How do we remind people they're part of something bigger when they don't get to see each other? There have to be ways to do it, okay? That's where you start with the goal and work backwards. By the way, the irony is, for the high holidays, is that even a question? Let's say we were all coming together in person. That's something we take for granted. We assume that that happens just when people happen to come together. But that's actually the single most important thing you can do as a community. Remind them that they're connected to one another, to something greater than themselves, bigger than themselves. There's a community that will hold them in hard times, right? That's the most important thing. And yet rabbis spend 50 hours writing sermons. Cantors spend 50 hours practicing Kol Nidre, all of which are incredibly important. And trust me, I'm going to do those things this summer. I can't wait. I love writing sermons, but that's actually the most important thing. So you start with the goals and work backwards, because community, feelings of community and belongingness cannot be a byproduct. They have to be the goal. Thank you for lifting that up, Lauren. It's awesome. So now, experiment with delivery systems before messing with the program or the service or the offering. So if you're trying to create a new program, before you go to a blank drawing board, try to think about, maybe all I need to do is change the delivery system. Okay, we don't need to rewrite Kol Nidre, but we do have to find a way to get people to hear it. We don't need to reinvent shofars and start pulling them off of unicorns, but we do need to make sure that there's an opportunity for people to hear it. So what we need to be thinking about before you go and try to do the most innovative thing and you get your whiteboard and your brainstorming, just think about the delivery system. By the way, that's how Netflix won the battle. Netflix didn't invent movies. They just changed the delivery system. Right? Their mission was, we want to get entertainment into the homes of people. So did Blockbuster. But Blockbuster got so focused on their business model that they stopped trying to innovate around the delivery system. So if your goal is to help people have a sweet Rosh Hashanah, maybe the delivery system is you're dropping off gift bags with honey sticks in them and apples. Does that make sense? So think about the delivery system. How do you get the program or service into the homes, into the lives of the people that you're serving? Next, don't be Moses, right? If you're a leader, find volunteers and understand their passions and then empower them and activate them. Moses, not once, but twice is told in Torah, you can't do it yourself. Twice, once by Yitro and once by God. And both times, Yitro tells him, go find judges that'll be on top, above other judges, basically create a whole infrastructure so that you're not the only one trying to do everything. Because not only is it bad for you, but it's actually bad for the people. And then in last week's Torah portion, B'halotcha, God says the same thing. Go find 70 elders and set them up as officers of the community. Because there are 600,000 mouths to feed out there and you can't do it yourself. So I say the same thing to you, right? You obviously are dedicated to your community. You're up at 8 o'clock listening to some rabbi from Providence ramble about the high holidays and it's not even July yet. But you can't do it yourself. You can't build community yourself. You can't deliver these programs yourself. You can't serve all of your congregants yourself. You're not a minion, right? There's a reason why these things require minions. So you need to make sure that you find the people around you. People have more time than they've had in a long time. They have more goodwill. Maybe they have less money, but they have more goodwill right now, assuming you've done your job as a community leader and checked in with them regularly and been a pastoral presence or right? If you've done those things and continue to cultivate community through this crisis, you have a lot of untapped goodwill out there. All you have to do is empower them. Give them the wheel, let them drive, and find ways to activate them. Which brings us to the last one, which is to maximize your resources. Right? We're going to spend a lot of time over the next few months worried about money. Did we raise enough money during the high holidays? Did we get enough pledges? Did members rescind their membership? We are going to be worried about those things, and there's probably going to be a 10 to 20% drop across the board. And that's just the truth. But I promise you, there is much more than a 20% increase in the amount of goodwill that you can create, cultivate, leverage, and actualize in your community if you really tap into that resource, which is people's time and people's talent. You're going to have less of their treasure, I'm sure of that, but you're going to have a lot more of their time and a lot more of their talent. So invite them in. And then finally, when all else fails, general programming guidance, just ask. If you're trying 50 different programmatic ideas and you get the same 7 people showing up, all else has failed. So ask people what they want. Send out a community survey. Do 5 interviews with people to get a sense of how they live their lives and what they're struggling with. Create a phone tree. By the way, the most innovative thing you can do right now is a community phone tree. Once a week on Friday, somebody in your community gets a phone call from somebody else to check in and see how they're doing. I don't think there's anything more meaningful that you could possibly do right now than that. Now, we're going to get into some ideas for Elul. And keeping an eye on the time, we're probably going to do this pretty quick. Does that sound okay? Elul, bullet points. Step 1. You need to ask yourself, what job does Elul do for you? When you're preparing for the high holidays and Elul comes around and you know there's that countdown for Rosh Hashanah, what does Elul do for you? Does it make you more anxious because it is a countdown and it feels like, oh yeah, I don't have enough days and the holidays are early this year. The holidays are early every year, right? But is that what it does for you? Or is it actually Elul, what it does for me is it's an opportunity to do cheshbon nefesh. I can really do some soul searching every single day, and Elul is a reminder. Maybe Elul is it really is a month that you spend calling your loved ones and apologize and say, I'm sorry, I wasn't my best this year, and I want to be better next time, right? Whatever job Elul does for you, that needs to be your guiding light throughout the month of Elul. If it's about reflection, make everything about reflection. If it's about connection, make everything about connection. If it's about atonement, make it all. But what you need to do is remember that it has to be your guiding light that's going to drive it. Right? And then once you figure out what that is, then you need to brainstorm around it. Here's a handful of ideas that I've seen just in my networks. One is you can host a series of drive-in and outdoor chauffeur blowing experiences in public parks and large parking lots. If you have any drive-in theaters around there, see when they're available and rent it out one night. You can also make your own little drive-in theater with using rental speakers or Bluetooth speakers. It's very easy technologically to create a drive-in theater experience in your own parking lot. And I would highly recommend it. It's an incredible throwback experience that, especially for communities coming together, is an incredible way for communities come together. And by the way, if you're thinking, yeah, but it's Shabbat and we don't drive on Shabbat, or it's the holidays and we don't drive on holidays, do it on a Thursday night. Have Minyan in a parking lot in a drive-in theater. Like, there are so many different ways that you can do it to kind of tap into that. Lorna, this is kind of going back, start a storytelling campaign in your community. Storytelling is an incredible way to make the community feel like it is wrapped around you. Familiar people telling amazing stories about what matters to them. If I were running a community right now, I would find one person for every day of Elul, and I would ask them to record a 2-minute video telling us about the most meaningful experience they ever had with my community. Or telling us about a great memory they have from high holidays, a great Rosh Hashanah memory, a great Yom Kippur memory. Or maybe you do a sort of 30-day build up to Yizkor. Maybe it's, one memory I have of someone that I loved. And I think there are incredibly meaningful ways, because you as a communal leader are going to always be in the position to lead with your own story. But I think the best thing you can do right now is lift up the stories of the people in your community and invite them to do that. Great. Flipgrid does that online. There's another opportunity. Develop a Train the Leader program to train young parents to lead their own high holiday family services. Right? There's actually a resource that I share at the end of this webinar where you'll, with a link to an online course that young families can take to become leaders of their own high holiday services. Direct people to the abundance of online resources for soul searching and reflection. Elul has a million great resources. I'm sure the Federation is going to pull together different resources, but don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. There's incredible stuff out there. If you want a meditation community thing over the course of Elul, you can have that. Like, there's something for everybody. For Tashlich, offer multiple time slots, right? I know for our community, it's always amazing to have everyone come together. We can't do that this year. But Tashlich is, for me, one of the most meaningful parts of the high holidays. So offer multiple time slots, and that might be the one day where you as a communal leader are really gonna have to be there the whole day. But I promise you, it's an incredible opportunity to see people face to face and really greet them with all the sweetness that you're hoping they'll experience around Rosh Hashanah. Do a hike or an Elul scavenger hunt. I know there's one community that's using geocaching, where you hide little findables think of it like a scavenger hunt, but using a GPS system, and leave little high holiday themed treasures for them to discover. I went geocaching this summer for the first time with my 8-year-old son and 4.5-year-old daughter, and it was amazing. It was like an incredible adventure. If that were your family program, you could take over the town. It would be such an incredible thing, and it's not hard to do. Even if all they found was like one honey stick at each of the locations, it's really amazing. And obviously, going back to the small groups, think about chavarot or book clubs or reflection circles. These are things that you don't need to facilitate. All you need to do is find people with a passion and let them create the process. Finally, there's the 10Q challenge. That's something during the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days of atonement. Now, here's the next thing. And again, this has to be the takeaway from this entire webinar. This is your why. When I started out with the general programming guidance, I asked you what the mission of your synagogue is or why you think it exists. That has to be your why when you create programs. When we talked about Elul, I asked you what job does Elul do for you? That has to be your why when it comes to Elul. And for the high holidays, here's the way I like to phrase the question, right? If blank doesn't happen, then it wouldn't really feel like Rosh Hashanah. It wouldn't really feel like Yom Kippur. It wouldn't really feel like the high holidays really happened. So now I want you to give me some answers. Give me one for Rosh Hashanah. If blank doesn't happen, then it's not really going to feel like Rosh Hashanah counts. Didn't really feel like it happened. What are some examples for you?
So one of the things that I know is not going to happen this year, when the entire congregation sings with me like Avinu Malkeinu, then it feels like the high holidays. It can't happen because we can't sing together on Zoom or live streaming or anything. So what do we do with that?
One of the things that I've loved in our community, and I'm 11, 12 years at this temple, is the second day of Rosh Hashanah is basically led by our youth group. So we get to sit and hear the next generation lead us in prayer, chant Torah, give the Devar Torah. And I find that, and my children are adults. I'm a little older than you, Rabbi. My children are adults. So these are other children I'm looking at, but it still gives me a great, wonderful feeling to watch and listen to these kids. And I'm afraid of missing that this year.
Yep. Yeah. Anyone else have something for Yom Kippur or for the whole Chagim?
Well, I can say for me, believe it or not, it's listening to the rabbi's sermons, because those are two of his largest sermons of the year. And they're usually very, very thought-provoking and bring us into the spirit of what the year is about.
Beautiful.
Shofar blowing. But that can happen in multiple ways, I think.
Right, right. So for those who didn't answer, I see Cheryl or Shara or Karen or Jody. I want you to write down an answer. I want you to have, because you're going to get in conversations when you start planning the holidays. And the first thing that's going to happen in the conversation is some enterprising individual is going to make a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet is going to include every single liturgical element of the entire holidays. And you're going to work backwards from that. Right? And by the way, and it's going to add up to 3.5 hours, and it's probably going to be longer because parts of it are going to be Zoom. And so from that point forward, you're going to be working backwards from 3.5 hours, looking at a list of things that maybe don't get this job done in the way that you need it to be done. So what you need to do is go into that conversation knowing I have my own needs. I have my own red line here. For me, if I can't hear the kids leading part of the service, I don't think I'm going to do this. I don't think I'm in.
I think it's helpful for us in constructing the service for the High Holy Days, because I think the rabbis, especially with Zoom, we're having a great deal of difficulty imagining how are we going to design this service in a way. I mean, we can't do 3 hours. We can't do these long services. So the question, I like what you're saying here. I think that, if it doesn't, what would really make the feelings that it's without this, that's not Rosh Hashanah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say the Hineni, the cantor comes in from the back. Okay. And for me, that's something very special, very beautiful, very spiritual. But you're right. I mean, it's very hard to reconstruct this in a way, or even construct it so that it's meaningful and makes people feel that it's the High Holy Days.
Yes.
Especially on Zoom.
Absolutely.
So Thank
For us, we have an additional challenge because our synagogue is Orthodox, so we won't necessarily incorporate Zoom into the prayer service.
Yes.
But again, we're small, so we usually maybe get 100 people on the high holidays. But even so, that's too much to gather in our sanctuary. And I don't know how we're going to accomplish, the traditional prayer service because it is long.
Right.
And we're trying to cut back on time. Maybe cut out some prayers. I'm not sure how this is going to look.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of difficult decisions, right? And I think that's why
services, one indoor, one outdoor, something like that. But
yeah, you'll definitely do some simultaneous things, some hybrid things. There's going to be a lot of difficult decisions and a lot of trade-offs. When you go into, those are going to be negotiations. When you go into negotiations, you have to know, what am I willing to risk? What am I willing to sacrifice? And what for me is a must? Because if you don't know that, you're going to end up fighting about everything, and you're going to lose steam about the battles by the time you get to the thing that actually matters to you. So you need to actually start with your why. Start with the single most important thing you can possibly do. Right? Look, if I'm a colleague of Lorna's, I'm going to do every single thing in my power to pass around the sheet music to Avinu Malkeinu, and I'm going to get 20 people individually to record that video. And while she's leading services, I'm going to go out and I'm going to press play on all of those 20 voices, so that while she's leading services, I'm going to surprise her with the sound of her congregants singing Avinu Malkeinu. Right? There are ways to do it, but it takes a lot of effort, and you can't do that for every prayer. You could work from here until Rosh Hashanah day one and you wouldn't get that done. But so you have to be able to prioritize. And look, these are the difficult trade-offs. And that's why you have to start with your why. I want to get to the next piece. Here's when you're developing prayers and experiences around the holidays, you have to answer the question, what is the Ikar? So when you tell me about Aleinu, the Grand Aleinu, what is the Ikar of the Grand Aleinu? What's the essence? What's the point of the Grand Ikar? And if all we've done is conveyed the liturgy and read it out loud or sang it out loud, we're not going to get to the Ikar of what it means in your finest suit, the nicest suit you wear the entire year, to bend down on the ground and put your forehead to the floor. The humbling experience of what that means to bow down before God in front of 500 people that you haven't seen all year, and you want to look professional and nice before them. And you're going to get down on your knees and put your forehead to the floor that you don't know the last time it was cleaned. That is a part of the Ikar of the Grand Aleinu. So you need to, again, start from the Ikar. And if it means that maybe we don't have time for the Grand Aleinu, but there has to be an opportunity for people to really feel humble before God. There has to be an opportunity for people to really prostrate themselves existentially and physically, not just choreographically. Then you're going to find a way to design from that. Now, there are different ways to approach it. There's the emotional lens. People have serious emotional needs they bring to the holidays. There's the pastoral lens. This is probably the most activated of all the lenses that we have leading into the high holidays. People are going to need to come into the services and be reminded that they are loved. People are burnt out. People are really struggling. They're at wit's end, and they are going to be coming with very deep, sometimes invisible pastoral needs. And we as leaders need to find a way to make sure that every one of them is reminded that they are loved. And every one of them is reminded, like Lorna said, that they are part of something bigger than themselves. And then, of course, there are the ritual needs, the social needs. People are lonely, they're dying for community, and the intellectual ones. There are some people like Nikki who come because they're really excited about the rabbi's sermon. They really want to be pushed intellectually. Now, does that mean that the rabbi's sermon is the only way to do it? No, that's one delivery system for the intellectual experience that we call sermon. You could pre-record the sermon and then have 10 small breakout groups talking about the topic. Now make sure they're facilitated, because otherwise they will just break down into people rating the rabbi's sermon. Make sure they're facilitated. But there are so many different ways to get that intellectual rigor that comes with a rabbi's sermon beyond just, watching and listening. It's not just a spectator sport anymore. So here are some, now I'm just going to kind of go through a bullet list of ideas, and then I'm hopefully going to be done in about 5 minutes, and then I'll take some questions, and then everybody can, I don't know, go into some breakout rooms or whatever they want to do with the rest of their night. Okay, so 1, use breakout rooms. Josh already said it, nailed it. 2, train dozens of facilitators. These are the sort of technical or tactical things that you should be doing. Train dozens of facilitators in your community to host conversations and rituals and Torah study. And you should start that now. If you're an Orthodox community and you're going to have multiple services happening simultaneously, guess what? You can't just have that one Baal Koreh. You can't just have that one person reading Torah. We know who that person is in every Orthodox community. There's that one person who you always call on who reads all 7 aliyot. You can't have that person do it all. You got to find someone else. That process starts now. Don't be afraid to outsource or live stream other services. It actually is a sign of strength to not try to do it all yourself. So if there's some other synagogue that does great, whatever, Kol Nidre, Torah discussion, if there's another rabbi whose sermon that if you were not a rabbi employed at a synagogue, you say to yourself, gosh, yeah, I'd probably go to Los Angeles and listen to Sharon Brous give a Devar Torah. Well, guess what? Sharon's going to be on live stream, right? So don't be afraid to outsource it. Your congregants know how to Google, so you're not going to be, revealing anything untoward if you tell them, if you give them access to these things. And it actually is a great sign of strength and tzimtzum, of sort of shrinking your, understanding the limits of your own capacity by saying, hey, for the month of Elul, we're going to do things once a week. Every Thursday evening, we're going to get together and do some learning together. But guess what? Every Wednesday, you can go to Machon Hadar. And every Tuesday, you can go to Central Synagogue. And every Monday, you can go to, I don't know, wherever, B'nai Jacob in West LA. David Kanevsky, he's a good, Yosef Kanevsky, he's amazing. All right. 4th, pre-record your sessions so that you can switch gears throughout. If you are using Zoom, you are doing things online, pre-record some sessions so that you can switch gears and take a break. If you're a rabbi leading services, if you're a cantor leading services, it is exhausting. And by the way, it's more exhausting when you're doing it on Zoom because you don't get any feedback from your congregants, right? If you're a rabbi and you give a sermon, normally there's that pause, that beat you can take because you just told a killer joke. Nobody's laughing on Zoom, right? Or if they are, it's like a very polite laugh and they're muted and you don't even know if you, so it actually takes more energy to do stuff on Zoom than it does anywhere else. So pre-record some of your sessions so that you can actually take a break for 20 minutes and then come back energized. Now for prayers. 1, multiple Torah readers. You can pre-record Torah readings, or if there's no minyan present in person and you're concerned about the halachic issues around it, you can use the blessing for aliyah, for an aliyah. Instead of a normal blessing for an aliyah, you can use the blessing la'asok b'divrei Torah, which is about you say before Torah study. And you can use that if you're having pre-recorded Torah readings. Now, obviously, check with your local rabbi. I'm just giving you some options about what's happening out there in the world, but this is definitely an option that I'm seeing pop up in multiple places. Now, Rosh Hashanah day 1, you're probably going to want to lean towards the more liturgical experiences, the traditional ones. Be experimental on day 2, right? You're not just planning for this year. Take some risks. Be experimental, and maybe you'll learn more about what's going to work for the rest of the year, which is going to continue to be weird and awkward. And you're going to have to keep doing hybrid in-person, not in-person stuff. So use day 2. You have a captive audience. Use day 2 to experiment with some new formats. Another thing, if you're concerned about leading all the services, you can hire out some music. There's all these different companies and cantors that are popping up offering a pre-recorded or a live prayer experience. So they can jump on at a set time, they can lead your Kol Nidre, they can lead your whatever, and that's if you need to take a break to sort of weave them into your services. Again, pre-record some of the davening. Here's some other ideas. high holiday gift bags with a contactless drop-off. So worth it. A physical tactile thing that people can hold on to is so worth it. Get yourself some honey sticks now. They're going to be out of stock very soon. Pre-record individual messages to each family. What if you found your 10 people on your executive committee and each of them sat in front of a computer, and instead of a phone drive where you ask people for money, it's just a love drive where each of them recorded a 1-minute video, 2-minute video, 3-minute video, telling each member why they care about them and what they're grateful for. And then each of them got that email, long before sundown on Rosh Hashanah. How would that feel if you got a personalized video from someone you care about in the community? Again, rent a drive-in theater, create your own, gather in very small groups throughout each day. And here's a list of additional resources. I'm going to put the link in the chat actually right now so that you've got it. Yes. David Bachman said, don't sacrifice pikuach nefesh. That comes first. I 100%. I don't know what that was in response to, but I 100% agree. That's non-negotiable from my little perch in the world. Pikuach nefesh means like people's health and safety. No matter what you do, don't sacrifice pikuach nefesh. Thank you for lifting that up, David. Okay, there's the link with the additional resources. Let's take a pause. I'm a minute after. I said I was going to be done at 8:40. What questions do you have? What thoughts do you have? Any other ideas? Anything else resonating for you? Or is this like, wow, I just drank out of a fire hose for the last hour and I need to take a break?
I have a question.
Great.
So this is all, it's all overwhelming, but how do we engage people who are not online? We have many members, older members in particular, who, we're sending out weekly emails, we're doing services on Zoom, we're doing our education programs on Zoom. And even though we're calling them once a month, they're missing out on a huge part of synagogue life right now.
Anyone else have ideas? I certainly have a handful, but I'd be curious to hear from the crowd.
I brought this up to our members today. We had a Zoom meeting, and they seem to feel that there's enough sons or daughters or grandchildren that could help them, the older people. That I'm one of the older people, but I mean people that really aren't equipped to use technology on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
can I just say we are hoping to do a drive to actually purchase or get used iPads and have people in the congregation willing to train or to set it up for the members who don't use it right now. I know I personally did it for my mom, who's 88, and we used one of my kids' old iPad. We set it up so the only thing she can see on it when she goes to look at it is FaceTime. She doesn't see anything else. It won't confuse her. All she has to do is touch that one FaceTime app, and then she can reach any of us.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you. Was that Lorna?
Yes.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Another thing to keep in mind is there's two different communities actually that I've worked with that have done this successfully. You've got all kinds of college kids who are home and really bummed out that they just missed out on 3 months of their college experience. And some of them might be doing distance learning in the fall too. You also have a bunch of teens who maybe they were going to go to camp, maybe they were going to get a job. They're all sitting at home too. Every single one of them. You find me a 12-year-old who isn't more technologically advanced than I am, and I'll say dig a little deeper, because they certainly are. Find a teen, set up a teen program, a matching program with your teens or college students to offer IT support to the folks in your community who might otherwise need it. That's, I think, an incredible opportunity to do a mitzvah. And reminding people, by the way, going back to Lorna's question about how do you remind people that they're part of something bigger? There was an incredible study done. It was about 12, 15 years ago out of Sweden. And they studied the sense of self-confidence and self-esteem. These are the two outcomes that they were focused on among young people. These are the young people, I think, under the age of 10, who grew up in a school, first in a pre-K and then an elementary school that was in the building with a senior living facility. And it was one of the first experiments in cross-generational learning and engagement. And it turns out that that the kids who grew up in an intergenerational facility, intergenerational community, had a higher sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, were less anxious, and tended then to be more connected to and contributing to community as they grew up after the study completed. So what that means is intergenerational community and community building opportunities is a great way to remind people that they're part of a really big world. And even though we're going through a pandemic now, that 88-year-old whose iPad you're fixing can tell you a few things about pandemics. They can tell you a few things about difficult times that the Jewish community has gone through before. They can tell you a few things, right? And that is an incredible way. And so what that does, now you can do it in a mean way, which is like, oh, this is nothing, let me tell you about da-da-da-da-da. But what it actually does for the young person who is exposed to an intergenerational relationship, what it does for the young person is it reminds them, oh, there are people out there who made it through really challenging things. There are people out there who survived incredibly difficult circumstances. I'm kind of in a really difficult circumstance right now. Maybe they have some knowledge for me. Maybe I'm more resilient than I think I am. So here is an incredible opportunity when you talk about, older folks in the community who don't necessarily have access or they're not adept to using technology. Here's an incredible opportunity. Call it an internship, right? Create an internship inside of your community and give it a fancy name and find $50 stipends for the young people. And I promise you, you'll have a line out the door for people who are really looking for an opportunity. They're looking for ways to contribute and make meaning in the world. And the last thing, and this is just a totally technical thing, send them a letter. Send all of the older folks in the community who are not connected to technology, send them a letter with the phone number to call in to the Zoom services. Even if they don't have an iPad, even if they have a phone. And every Zoom service has a phone number connected to it. Make sure it is not password protected for phone callers, and they're good to go.
Or you can maybe even better, not in schools they have synchronous and asynchronous learning. So if most Zoom things are recordable. So if you've done a service and you recorded that service, then the person at home the next day can watch it on their TV if a teenager helps them get to that point. And so then they see a live person helping them, and they also see everybody else whom they haven't seen in a long time.
Beautiful, Rabbi. Thank you. Good. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
The question, we're struggling with the issue of the cantor, myself, the pianist, and the, let's say, the Zoom person might go to the actual place where we're having the services and pre-record, okay? As a result, as opposed to doing it on Zoom. Any feelings about that? Or doing it on Zoom, we can do it on Zoom that way. Or pre-record everything, and you play it on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'm not sure what we're gonna do at this point, but.
Here's my suggestion.
Yeah.
It will be exhausting. It takes a very serious psychological toll to preach to an empty sanctuary. It's actually a very painful thing to do, to sing Hineni, and there's nobody to hear you other than God say, "Here I am."
Interesting.
Don't do that on the same day that you need to be live and present and remind everybody that they are loved. If you can, record those in advance,
right,
in the sanctuary, and then take a day off,
right,
and go to, where's that lake? Go to the Franklin Lakes and get a kayak and sit in the middle of the lake for a couple hours and just tell yourself over and over again, L'Shana Haba'ah, like next year is going to be better. And then use those as pre-recorded sessions so that when you're actually running the high holidays, you can do it over Zoom, refreshed and energized, and then just press play when it comes time for a sermon or the liturgical elements.
Thank you.
And by the way, that kind of helps Lorna's thing too, because then when Lorna's singing Avinu Malkeinu, Lorna can sing along with Lorna. That makes sense?
Rabbi, thank you very much. One thing that we do or have been doing for quite a number of years on Yom Kippur, letting everybody come up and spend a few minutes before the Arona Kodesh. You know, we open the Ark and people can come up and stand by the Torahs and just have a few moments of silence. So this year, what we're thinking of doing, we're a very small congregation. I mean, halavai, we should have dozens of people to be able to have volunteers. I mean, we're barely 24 ourselves. But scheduling times for people to come in, because we're not even sure if we're going to be in the sanctuary or not, be able to have service. But even if we're not able to have a service there, we could still have people coming in at scheduled times to at least spend a few minutes before the Ark. So that's something I'm throwing out there as a suggestion for people as well.
Beautiful. I'm half Sephardic and half Ashkenazi, and it is such a visceral, important connection to get that time with the Torah in the Ark. And so, yes, absolutely put that out there as an option. The more that you can, again, this is about mixing media, right? Or mixing modes. You want people to have something tactile. And the great thing about the Passover Seder, and this is why it's the single, aside from going to college, it's the thing that most American Jews do, right? 94% go to college, about 84% do a Passover Seder. Pretty good. Right? But the reason why the Passover Seder works is because there's tactile elements to it. There's stuff on the table that you can pick up and play with. You put your finger into the wine and you dip out 10 times. You know, you're singing together. There's liturgy together. You eat together. You close your eyes and taste the bitterness, and it brings you back, and it's visceral. The more that you can find, just think about everyone's 5 senses. Think about the 5 senses. You know, this is another framework. I offer the emotional, social, intellectual, etc. Think about people's 5 senses. They can see. What are you going to show them? Is there a video for them to see? Is there a picture in the background? They can hear. What are you going to sing to them? They can touch. What are they going to hold in their hands? They can taste. Is there going to be a honey stick moment where everybody has a taste of honey in the middle of the services, and then you guide them through a guided meditation to eat a 15-minute raisin like John Kabat-Zinn does? Whatever it is, think about those 5. Is there a way that they can touch? You think about the 5 senses and different ways to activate them. The Aron is a beautiful way to get people physically connected. And so brainstorm around that. Think about different ways that you can activate those senses. And it'll become a really heightened, interesting experience for people.
We've especially seen emotional connection with families when the parents are there with their kids or grandparents with their grandkids.
I'll never forget the first Torah that I showed my kids, which was, the Torah covers were made by this amazing artist named Gad Almaliach, who actually recently passed away. And he made the Torah covers in memory of my father, who passed away when I was much younger. And the first Torah that they got to interact with and actually touch was that Torah. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. So please, you know, find ways to give people some connection, a way to ground those senses and heighten them and lift them up. And I promise you, the more thoughtfulness that you put into it, it doesn't mean it's more work. It doesn't mean it has to be harder for you. Just be thoughtful. Just put people at the put your why at the center of any work that you do. Make sure you're really in close touch with that why, and the rest will write itself. All right. Any more questions? Any other thoughts? I'm happy to stick around a couple extra minutes. I know this is a lot of material, and I apologize. Like I said, drinking out of a fire hose here. So, anything else on your mind that you wanna share? Oh, I'm gonna put my email in here too. I want you to know that I say, you know, you have speakers that come all the time and they say, yeah, be in touch. Here's my email. And they put it on the last slide and then they speed through the last slide so you don't actually get to write the email address down. I actually mean it. I want to know what's going to work for you. I want to know what you're thinking about. I want to know what you're struggling with. This is how I learn. I just spent this webinar was a gift to me because I got to spend a month learning about what's working around the world. And now I want to learn from you. So I mean it. Please be in touch.
So thank you very much. You certainly gave me a lot to think about and a lot of ideas to ruminate on. Yeah, there was a lot here. Thank you. Rachel shared the evaluation link in the chat box. You might have to scroll up through all the thank yous that everyone's saying, but please fill that out. We really do use that data to help improve our future programs, and that will also be linked in the email with the Google Doc and slides. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
All right. Laila Tov, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
So much, Laila Tov.
Okay, Laila Tov, thank you, Rabbi.